lovely rose garden, and welcome to Roselin Reviews. I'm Avalon Roselin, indie author, and your commentator on the state of LGBT representation in media for the evening. Author Chuck Tingle is, or has been, best known for his short erotic works with titles such as Pounded in the Butt by My Book, Pounded in the Butt by My Own Butt, and Trans Wizard Harriet Porber and the Bad Boy Paris Aurelius. These and other titles led to him being known as a parody writer, but upon actually reading Trans Wizard Harriet Porber some time ago and following his blog, it has been made abundantly clear that Tingle is sincere in his creative endeavors and actually has quite a lot of insightful commentary to make with these admittedly camp stories. Camp Damascus, published in summer of 2023, was Tingle's debut into novel-length horror and approached the topic of conversion therapy with Tingle's trademark flair for taking a bizarre premise and presenting it with genuine heart and witty writing. I have a full review of Camp Damascus available to view if you're interested in my further thoughts on that book. With the success of Camp Damascus, Bury Your Gaze was published just a year later. Bury Your Gaze follows the harrowing ordeal faced by Misha, a writer at a Hollywood studio who has just been informed by his producer that the board have decided he needs to either kill off or straight wash the leads of his television series in order to maintain projected ratings. Misha, having dealt with being on the other side of the screen from such writing decisions, firmly decides that no, he will neither kill his queer characters nor make them straight. The board is apparently not pleased with that decision, and strange events begin to occur around Misha that mirror the plots and characters of his previous horror works. As you can likely tell from that summary alone, there is a lot of dealing with systemic queerphobia and queerbaiting in this book. There is also a fairly large dose of internalized homophobia owing to the experiences Misha had growing up, closeted in Montana, especially when subplots are introduced about a high school reunion and Misha's first Oscar nomination for a short film. What I am finding is often the case with Tingle's work is that he writes far beyond the initial premise in a way that can make it difficult to describe. Because not only does Bury Your Gaze handle the already complex history and relationship that many queer people have with media representation, and the lack thereof, internalized queerphobia, and navigating romantic relationships when you have not fully accepted your own identity, but also the ethics of generative AI, algorithmic marketing, and inequality present within marginalized communities where some niche identities are further othered by the people who should be their staunchest allies, and the unrealistic expectations that are placed upon marginalized creators as opposed to cis-het white male creators. And the most astounding thing about this is Tingle does it well. These issues are all layered on top of each other and intertwined, and it is both refreshing and eye-opening to see them portrayed as such. As someone who can relate to these issues, it serves to make the story and characters feel like real people. Not more than a handful of chapters in, I began to wonder if Tingle is or was a screenwriter for a major network, because the depictions of Misha's life and job felt so real. While the subject matter can be difficult to stomach, especially with how visceral its depictions can be, and that's not even touching on the actual horror elements, I could not recommend it more to a queer audience or those seeking to better understand a queer perspective. While no one queer writer can capture the entire experience of the community, I think that Bury Your Gaze is a fantastic starting point for a look into just how complex these issues are. I truly cannot overstate how the characters guide the reader through these issues with such profound humanity. Even when faced with the outlandish struggles of horror movie monsters coming to life and the somehow even less understandable struggles of Hollywood business politics, Misha grounds the reader with relatable anecdotes and sharp-witted quips. The supporting cast, consisting of Tara, who, as the tech expert and Arrow Ace woman, is largely invisible to everyone except her closest friends, and Zeke, Misha's loving, supportive, and openly bisexual boyfriend, also give the reader more to care about. All too often in horror works, the main character's friends and loved ones are there only to pad out the body count. But I was legitimately worried for these characters, and at one point, afraid they would actually be killed off. The last notable character is Jack, the producer who claims to be on Misha's side, while insisting that he either comply with the studio's demands or face heavy legal fines for breaching his contract. I found the way Jack was handled as an antagonist to be one of the most realistic aspects of the book. Jack would not consider himself to be homophobic. In fact, he would even call himself an ally, but he upholds the heteronormative status quo that suppresses queer voices in the name of profit. I consider that a much more true-to-life portrayal of homophobia than having a street preacher shouting slurs. Not that it doesn't happen in real life, but I would consider it less pervasive in society than the two-faced support offered by large companies and powerful people who are not impacted by these issues beyond grinding numbers for marketing figures. I liked what Tingle did with his short erotic pieces, even if they are not for me, in the sense that I simply don't enjoy reading that kind of content. I thoroughly enjoyed Camp Damascus as a foray into longer works overtly in the horror genre. Bury Your Gaze grabbed me and did not let me go. It has been ages since I stayed up late to read just one more chapter and ended up finishing the book in the late hours of the night. But to discuss why in further detail, I will need to delve into spoilers. And so, here is your warning. Thank you for watching this far into the video. There are spoilers ahead. If you would rather enjoy this media without spoilers, please stop here. But before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you left a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. You can also check out the links in the description for other ways that you can support Roselin Books, such as purchasing my books or becoming a supporter on Patreon or Ko-fi. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you again soon. The external conflict of Bury Your Gaze manages to be more than it appears on its surface, taking what could be a hauntingly fun story about an overzealous fan or a supernatural curse enacting the violence of Misha's own creations upon him, and turning it into a cautionary tale about generative AI and the loss of humanity amid profit-seeking algorithms. So, if that's what Tingle can do with external conflict, imagine how deep he can go with the internal conflict. This is the true appeal of Tingle's work to me, and it features not only in full-length novels like Camp Damascus and Bury Your Gaze, but also his short erotic fiction. Granted, I have only read one in full and glanced at a few others, but there is a sincerity in Tingle's writing that peels back the layers of artifice from any situation, both everyday and bizarre, to expose its emotional core. For instance, imagine my surprise when what I believed to be a supernatural thriller about a man's past writings coming to haunt him in the wake of his decision to break his contract with the studio turned out to actually be about the dangers of generative AI and how far a company will go to make an even slightly larger profit. And I do mean slight. The figure that the swarm of nanobots gives Misha at one point is less than 1%. This highlights the issue beautifully. AI cannot think. It cannot reason or rationalize. It cannot prioritize beyond what it is told to prioritize. So if the company bigwigs tell the nanobots they want to make money, it will resort to the most brutal of methods without a moment's hesitation to squeeze an extra penny out of stone. And predictably, the nanobots quickly decide the staff are sucking up resources and funds that it could replace to turn a higher profit. Every single decision made by the antagonistic force in this book is for the sake of money, which is ironically how Misha manages to best it, not by appealing to hearts and minds, but to wallets, using his time in the spotlight to make his coming out go viral and make queer stories ultra-marketable. It is peak rainbow capitalism. That scene cuts even deeper when examining how queer people are often forced to come out to advertise their authenticity. There are only too many instances of queer actors and writers being outed against their will or otherwise harassed into confirming their LGBTQ identity to appease the masses. This feeds into another major theme of Bury Your Gays. The most impactful message to me was delivered in the way that Misha handled his internalized homophobia and his reluctance to come out, despite being what he calls Hollywood out. Everyone around him in California pretty much knows that he's gay. He's in a long-term relationship with a bisexual man and brings him as a +1 to important events surrounding his Oscar nomination. But he has never explicitly stated out loud and in public that he is gay. Back in his Montana hometown, he is still in the closet, as seen in a scene where he returns home for a high school reunion without his boyfriend and dodges the question of having a wife, lying by omission about his sexuality. The reader eventually finds out that Misha did have an encounter in Montana when he was young, being nearly caught kissing one of his male friends who is now married and presumably hiding his sexual orientation from his wife and friends. This incident deeply ingrained a fear of being outed into Misha, particularly when it comes to sharing affection with his partner, as he gets irate at someone who takes a picture of him kissing his boyfriend at a party in Hollywood. This resonated with me as someone who likewise struggles to make my identity known, which may seem strange as I'm very vocal about it on this channel, but in my personal life, I have been known to let assumptions slide uncorrected simply because it is easier than addressing the truth of my orientation with someone I don't know well, even if it hurts me to do so. In that way, I understand Misha. It is often easier to let people make assumptions and not correct them, and also maintain the deniability of never outright confirming their suspicions. But in doing so, Misha robs his audience and himself of the representation that is so desperately needed. No one should ever feel pressured into coming out, and the audience is not owed that information from a creator. But at the same time, there is strength and hope for younger queer people in being a visibly out successful figure to look up to. Coming out is complicated. It is a progression, a series of conversations and moments that occur throughout a queer person's life. It is an affirmation of self-identity and a statement to the world. It can be frightening, and while the closet may be a safer place, it is also a lonely place. Every queer person will have a different experience with coming out, oftentimes many. I felt for this aspect of Misha's story and think that this, if for no other reason, is why cishet allo readers should pick up this book. Yes, queer readers will have a deeper connection with Misha, but this is a great place for allies to further grow their empathy and understanding of what queer people go through. Speaking of things that will resonate more deeply with the queer community, let's talk about hierarchy and the erasure of aspec identities. Misha's best friend Tara becomes his secret weapon, not only because she is knowledgeable about technology and internet safety. Wouldn't this be a great time to insert a sponsorship from a VPN? But because she's Aero Ace, a demographic that the almighty algorithm has never bothered to do research on because it was never deemed profitable enough to care about. The LGBT identities that it is aware of are fairly limited. Gay men, lesbians, some bisexuals and pansexuals, maybe a polycule or trans woman as a curiosity indistinguishable from stereotype. But beyond that, it lacks the depth and nuance required to approach the full spectrum of the community or how identities intersect with one another. Tara is invisible to the algorithm. Therefore, she is the one who is able to thwart it and upload a virus to take out the nanobots, as is done in many science fiction AI takes over the world stories. It's a fresh twist on a genre staple. All of this culminates in the best one-liner I have ever seen delivered by a character, because it truly feels like Tingle speaking through the narrative in the best way. How about I write what I want? No algorithms, no focus groups, no profit margins. just pure, unfiltered, queer creativity unleashed upon the audience. I could almost believe this is Chuck Tingle's origin story. He manages to sum up in 7 small words what all writers desire: to write what we want to write, to follow an idea or a character or a feeling to its conclusion and not have to change it to be marketable or less problematic, the 2 sides of the sword that cuts into Misha's creative life throughout the book. Queer authors do not owe cishet allo audiences a distilled, sanitized version of our experiences to make ourselves palatable to them. Likewise, queer authors do not owe queer audiences an escapist fantasy where no form of discrimination exists, especially as they cross over and impact different groups within the LGBTQ community differently. We deserve to tell our stories however we want to tell them, warts and all. If you read and enjoyed Bury Your Gaze or are otherwise looking for media with similar vibes, I of course recommend Tingle's other book, Camp Damascus, which similarly uses a cosmic, demonic possession style of horror to address the real-life terror of conversion camps. I would also suggest checking out I Saw the TV Glow, which, while very different in tone and subject matter, also prominently incorporates 90s television into its story of internalized queerphobia and self-acceptance, or the tragic lack thereof. And that is all for this time, my lovely Rose Garden. Please leave a like on this video, subscribe for more like this, and tell me in the comments if you've enjoyed any of Tingle's works. I'd really like to know what other people think of his writing, whether it is the long-form horror books or the Tinglers. Keep growing till next time, Rose Garden.